Recessions don't hit every city equally. Some places are shielded by diverse economies or resilient industries. Others, especially those heavily reliant on consumer spending, travel, and hospitality, can be thrown into economic chaos. Among the most vulnerable are cities whose lifeblood is tourism. When people start tightening their belts during a recession, vacations and travel plans are often the first luxuries to be cut. In the US, some cities thrive almost entirely on out-of-town visitors, conventions, events, and seasonal tourism. This article explores 5 major American cities: Las Vegas, Orlando, Honolulu, New Orleans, and San Francisco, that could be hit the hardest in the event of a recession. We'll break it down into 10 key reasons these cities are particularly vulnerable, from their dependence on hospitality jobs to their sky-high cost of living. 1. Las Vegas, a city built on discretionary spending. Las Vegas is perhaps the clearest example of a tourism-reliant economy. Nicknamed America's Playground, Vegas lives and breathes entertainment, gambling, and leisure. In a strong economy, it thrives, welcoming over 38 million tourists annually, with many spending extravagantly on casinos, shows, restaurants, and luxury shopping. However, in a recession, when consumers pull back on discretionary spending, Las Vegas suffers disproportionately. Gambling revenue plummets, show ticket sales drop, and high-end restaurants see a dip in foot traffic. During the Great Recession of 2008, Las Vegas had one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, peaking over 14%. The city also faced a housing crisis, with one of the highest foreclosure rates nationally. The city's dependence on non-essential spending makes it extremely vulnerable to any economic downturn. 2. Orlando, FL, theme park capital. Facing a tourist crunch. Orlando is synonymous with theme parks: Walt Disney World, Universal Orlando, SeaWorld, and more. These attractions aren't just landmarks, they're economic engines, employing hundreds of thousands and generating billions in revenue. But a major recession could hit Orlando especially hard. Traveling to Disney or Universal requires major upfront costs: flights, hotel stays, park tickets, food, and merchandise. For families, these trips are often saved for and planned far in advance. But in a recession, they're often the first to go. When tourism slows, so do the hotel bookings, restaurant reservations, and retail sales that keep Orlando humming. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Orlando's tourism revenue dropped by more than 60%, and tens of thousands of hospitality workers were laid off or furloughed. This showed just how fragile a tourism-first economy can be. A future recession, though not as disruptive as the pandemic, could have similar economic shockwaves. 3. Honolulu, HI, isolated and dependent on air travel. Honolulu, the capital of Hawaii, is not just a tourist destination. It is tourism. Hawaii's economy is incredibly dependent on air travel and vacationing tourists. Honolulu's beaches, resorts, and cultural experiences draw millions of visitors from the mainland, US, Japan, and other parts of Asia every year. However, the city's geographic isolation means it's especially vulnerable during recessions. People aren't just driving or taking a quick train to Hawaii, they're flying hours across the Pacific. Those flights, paired with higher-than-average hotel costs and food prices, make it one of the more expensive vacations one can take. In times of economic contraction, travel to Honolulu often dips significantly. This not only affects hotels and airlines, but also trickles down to restaurants, local tour operators, museums, and transportation services. A prolonged recession could devastate a large percentage of jobs in Oahu, where the tourism industry employs roughly 1/3 of the workforce. 4. New Orleans, LA. Festivals, culture, and a fragile economy. New Orleans is a city with soul, music, food, festivals, and history. Tourism is its lifeblood, and signature events like Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest, and French Quarter Fest generate millions in annual revenue. These events attract people from across the world and fuel everything from hotels and restaurants to transportation and retail. But the city's economy isn't particularly diversified. According to pre-pandemic data, nearly 43% of jobs in New Orleans were tied to hospitality and tourism. When people stop traveling, the city doesn't just lose out on revenue, it loses its identity. New Orleans also faces structural challenges. It has one of the highest poverty rates among US cities and underfunded public services. A recession would likely deepen inequality, strain public infrastructure, and widen the gap between residents and tourists even further. 5. San Francisco. CA. Luxury travel, business tourism, and tech spillover. While not as overtly dependent on tourism as the other cities listed, San Francisco still relies heavily on travel, particularly high-end tourism and tech-related business travel. It's a destination city with world-famous attractions: the Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz Island, Fisherman's Wharf, and more. It also hosts countless international conventions and tech conferences. However, San Francisco is also one of the most expensive cities in the US to visit. When a recession hits and corporate budgets shrink, business travel is among the first expenses to get cut. Leisure travelers, meanwhile, may opt for more affordable destinations. During the pandemic, San Francisco lost billions in convention and tourism revenue, and downtown hotels saw massive layoffs. A future recession could similarly squeeze the local economy, especially if tech hiring slows and companies tighten their travel budgets. 6. High concentration of low-wage tourism jobs. All 5 cities suffer from the same economic structure: a heavy reliance on low-wage, service-based employment. Hotel maids, casino staff, restaurant workers, tour guides, and rideshare drivers make up a huge chunk of the labor force in these destinations. These jobs are usually the first to disappear in a recession, and the last to return. Many lack job security, health benefits, or union protections. When downturns hit, entire segments of the population can find themselves without a financial safety net, increasing housing insecurity, food instability, and debt. 7. Real estate and hospitality overbuild cities like Las Vegas, Orlando, and Honolulu have heavily invested in real estate and hospitality infrastructure. In boom times, this makes sense. New resorts, hotels, condos, and entertainment complexes draw more tourists and investors. But in a recession, overbuilding can become a liability. Empty hotel rooms, unfinished projects, and plummeting occupancy rates create a perfect storm. Developers pull back, layoffs spike, and property values decline. Cities are left with unsold inventory and underutilized assets. Las Vegas learned this the hard way in 2008, when massive developments were halted mid-construction, and entire blocks of housing developments sat abandoned. 8. Vulnerability to international travel disruptions. Tourism-heavy cities, particularly Honolulu and San Francisco, rely significantly on international travelers. In a global recession, the strong dollar can make US cities prohibitively expensive for overseas tourists. At the same time, economic instability abroad means fewer people flying in from Europe, Asia, or South America. International visitors tend to spend more per trip than domestic travelers, so their absence creates an outsized impact. Cities that cater to foreign tourists often find themselves competing harder for a shrinking pool of international dollars during economic downturns. 9. Tax revenue volatility. A lesser-known impact of a tourism slump is the drop in municipal tax revenue. Cities like Las Vegas and Orlando rely heavily on room taxes, event fees, and sales taxes from tourist-related businesses. When visitors vanish, so does a huge portion of the city's income. This puts pressure on city governments to cut services, parks, transit, public safety, just when residents need them most. Recessions can turn into civic crises, leaving cities unable to meet obligations or fund necessary programs. In cities already facing budget pressures, like New Orleans, a downturn could have dire consequences for infrastructure and social services. 10. Long-term brand and perception damage. Finally, recessions don't just create short-term financial pain, they can also inflict long-term damage on a city's brand. If tourists associate a city with rising crime, deteriorating infrastructure, or widespread poverty during a downturn, they may choose not to return even after the economy rebounds. Cities that fail to maintain their image or adapt to new travel behaviors may lose out to emerging destinations that are more affordable or better equipped for post-recession travel trends. San Francisco and New Orleans, for instance, have already struggled with negative press around homelessness and safety, challenges that can become more visible during recessions. Tourism can be a wonderful economic driver, but it comes with risks, especially in uncertain times. For cities like Las Vegas, Orlando, Honolulu, New Orleans, and San Francisco, a recession threatens more than just lower visitor counts. It jeopardizes livelihoods, public services, and long-term growth. The key to weathering future downturns lies in economic diversification, resilient infrastructure, and forward-thinking policy. Without those, these iconic cities may find that what makes them great in good times also makes them vulnerable in the worst.